Hi, everyone. Here is Chinese drama. Tears in Heaven. The girl nervously entered the man's office. The man questioned her about how she was using his brother's feelings. The girl was furious and made it clear that their love was genuine. The man, however, was dismissive and warned her not to exploit his brother's feelings for her own gain. The girl's name was Du Xiaosu, and the man was Lei Yuzheng. Lei Yuzheng and Du Xiaosu's boyfriend, Xiao Zhenrong, were not blood brothers but were closer than brothers. They had grown up together and shared a deep bond. In the car, Xiao Zhenrong excitedly told Lei Yuzheng that he had met a particularly hard-working and kind girl. He felt very fortunate. Lei Yuzheng immediately pointed out that Xiao Zhenrong must have fallen for the girl. After work, Du Xiaosu saw Xiao Zhenrong waiting for her downstairs, saying he wanted to introduce her to someone important. When Xiao Zhenrong showed her a photo, Du Xiaosu was stunned. She and Lei Yuzheng locked eyes. Lei Yuzheng pretended not to know Du Xiaosu and greeted her warmly. To her surprise, Lei Yuzheng was also her boss. It was then that Du Xiaosu realized she had been hired by Buiyuan because of Xiao Zhenrong. Although Lei Yuzheng exchanged pleasantries, he clearly didn't like Du Xiaosu. When she tried to apologize, Lei Yuzheng refused. Du Xiaosu felt wronged and expressed that meeting Xiao Zhenrong was the happiest thing in her life. After they left, Lei Yuzheng repeatedly cautioned Xiao Zhenrong not to trust others too easily. Du Xiaosu hurried after them, feeling embarrassed. What had Du Xiaosu done to make Lei Yuzheng dislike her so much? The story began a few months earlier. Du Xiaosu, an intern journalist, was woken up early by her editor and rushed to the airport to catch a headline story. In her haste, she bumped into a stranger. A simple "Are you okay?" flustered Du Xiaosu, and she hurried away. The man was also reminded of a girl he had helped on a rainy night. While chasing after Yan Jingjing, they unfortunately got into a car accident. In the hospital, Du Xiaosu was awakened by a phone call while still in a daze. Her editor scolded her, saying if she couldn't get the interview, she shouldn't bother coming back to work. With no choice, Du Xiaosu sneaked out of the hospital early. In the corridor, she noticed a doctor wearing a mask, with strikingly handsome features, and she couldn't help but glance back at him. After leaving a noodle shop, Du Xiaosu realized she had forgotten her phone. Just as she turned around, she collided with Xiao Zhenrong, who was hurrying back to return her phone. Seeing the handsome man returning her phone, Du Xiaosu was stunned. She didn't notice the car passing by as she turned to leave, but at that moment, Xiao Zhenrong pulled her into his arms. He gently reminded her to be careful. He then received a phone call and had to leave. Du Xiaosu found herself lost in thought as she watched him walk away. The interview task still unfinished, Du Xiaosu checked the hospital map. She disguised herself as a nurse and climbed the wall of Yan Jingjing's room. She was quite pleased with herself. She quickly took out her camera, only to be caught by Xiao Zhenrong as he came to check on the patient. Startled, Du Xiaosu lost her footing, but Xiao Zhenrong managed to catch her just in time. The two fell to the ground while holding onto each other, only to be misunderstood by the nurse who came in to change the dressing. He stepped forward, cornering Du Xiaosu, demanding to know who she really was, while carefully shielding her from bumping into the wall. Du Xiaosu honestly revealed her identity, pleading with Xiao Zhenrong to give her a chance to take the photos. But loyal to his duties, Xiao Zhenrong still threw Du Xiaosu out of the room. Forced by circumstances, Du Xiaosu threatened Xiao Zhenrong by telling the hospital staff she was his girlfriend. However, Xiao Zhenrong, adhering to his professional ethics, didn't let her succeed. As they walked down the corridor, one behind the other, she wore a face full of worry, while his was filled with smiles. Yet, the air between them was tinged with a hint of sweetness. Du Xiaosu brought coffee to the hospital and happened to meet Xiao Zhenrong and his colleagues. She took out the coffee she had prepared for him, and the doctors all praised how beautiful Xiao Zhenrong's girlfriend was. Xiao Zhenrong smiled but remained silent. Downstairs, the hospital was crowded. Upon hearing that someone was about to jump off a building, Du Xiaosu and Xiao Zhenrong hurried over. They stood on either side, trying to persuade Yan Jingjing. Suddenly, Du Xiaosu's phone rang, and Xiao Zhenrong quickly pulled Yan Jingjing back over the railing. However, he accidentally slipped and nearly fell himself. Fortunately, Du Xiaosu caught him, but her strength wasn't enough, and they both fell from the building. Luckily, they landed on an air cushion below and weren't injured. Reporters surrounded them, and Xiao Zhenrong suddenly grabbed Du Xiaosu's hand and ran away. He took the opportunity to ask for her phone number. That evening, Xiao Zhenrong called Du Xiaosu and invited her to dinner the next day. At the restaurant, Du Xiaosu started gossiping about Xiao Zhenrong's girlfriend. Xiao Zhenrong looked intently at Du Xiaosu as she made a wish and confessed his feelings to her. Du Xiaosu was momentarily unable to respond and excused herself to the restroom. On the way back, Xiao Zhenrong took the initiative to hold Du Xiaosu's hand and put it in his pocket to keep it warm, which touched Du Xiaosu deeply. Upon hearing about Yan Jingjing's ordeal, Du Xiaosu was filled with righteous anger. She stopped Lei Yuzheng's car to demand an explanation. As he looked at the girl in front of his car, Lei Yuzheng seemed to recognize her slightly. Du Xiaosu demanded that Lei Yuzheng agree to her interview. It was because Du Xiaosu chased after her car that the accident happened, and later she even disguised herself and went through great lengths to interview Yan Jingjing, only for Lei Yuzheng to expose her hypocrisy on the spot. Du Xiaosu was left speechless, and Lei Yuzheng drove away. Du Xiaosu then went to the hospital, where she overheard a conversation between Yan Jingjing and her assistant. Yan Jingjing originally planned to use a self-inflicted injury to frame Lei Yuzheng. Du Xiaosu was heartbroken and nearly fainted, but fortunately, Xiao Zhenrong arrived just in time to catch her. Xiao Zhenrong comforted Du Xiaosu thoughtfully. Du Xiaosu decided to resign because being an entertainment reporter was not her true passion. She wanted to return to her original profession, architecture. Xiao Zhenrong fully supported her decision and recommended that she apply to Buiyuan. Du Xiaosu waited outside the restaurant, wanting to apologize to Lei Yuzheng. However, Lei Yuzheng didn't give her the chance, mistakenly thinking she was afraid of a lawsuit. Xiao Zhenrong took Du Xiaosu's resume and handed it to Lei Yuzheng, asking him to help her get into Buiyuan. Lei Yuzheng cautiously warned Xiao Zhenrong to be careful with this girl. That evening, Du Xiaosu received a call from Buiyuan's HR department offering her a job. Du Xiaosu was overjoyed, unaware that it was Xiao Zhenrong who had helped her. When Xiao Zhenrong's mother heard that her son had a girlfriend, she asked him to bring her home for dinner. Du Xiaosu was very nervous. As the car stopped and Xiao Zhenrong pulled her into the house, she became even more anxious. It was only then that she realized Xiao Zhenrong came from a wealthy family and lived in a luxurious villa. Fortunately, Xiao Zhenrong's mother was kind and approachable, which helped Du Xiaosu relax, and the atmosphere became much more lively. As they chatted, Xiao Zhenrong's mother was taken aback when she learned that Du Xiaosu was from Pingtan. The next day, Xiao Zhenrong arrived early at a restaurant and asked Du Xiaosu to meet him there after work. When Du Xiaosu was about to head over, she received a call from Xiao Zhenrong's mother, who repeatedly warned her not to tell anyone about it. Meanwhile, Xiao Zhenrong kept calling, but Du Xiaosu had to hang up. When Xiao Zhenrong's mother heard that Du Xiaosu's father's name was Du Makai, she looked uneasy. Over 30 years ago, Xiao Zhenrong's mother and Du Xiaosu's father were lovers. In the end, Du Xiaosu's father left Xiao Zhenrong's mother without saying a word. To this day, she still doesn't understand why and has never been able to forgive him. Xiao Zhenrong's mother couldn't accept the idea of her son being with his daughter. She demanded that Du Xiaosu and Xiao Zhenrong break up immediately. Xiao Zhenrong waited for a long time at the restaurant. He went to the area below Du Xiaosu's apartment and called her close friend, only to be told that Du Xiaosu had already gone to bed. Xiao Zhenrong was utterly confused. Watching Xiao Zhenrong's lonely figure from the window, Du Xiaosu couldn't stop her tears from falling. The next day, Xiao Zhenrong stopped Du Xiaosu outside Buiyuan's building. Du Xiaosu didn't want to say much, but Xiao Zhenrong forcibly pulled her into his car. This scene was coincidentally witnessed by Lei Yuzheng, who was arriving at work. Xiao Zhenrong asked Du Xiaosu why she was avoiding him. Suddenly, Du Xiaosu leaned forward and deeply kissed Xiao Zhenrong for a long time, then tearfully broke up with him and ran out of the car. Ignoring the traffic police, Xiao Zhenrong chased after her, pulling Du Xiaosu into his arms. He was in so much pain. Du Xiaosu lied, saying that her ex-boyfriend had come back to reconcile, and that Xiao Zhenrong was just a substitute to fill her loneliness. How hurtful those words were, to have given his heart only to be told he was a mere substitute. Xiao Zhenrong shook his head after hearing this, unable to believe it, let alone accept it. Du Xiaosu insisted on breaking up and walked away. Why are people in love blocked by ignorance? Lei Yuzheng was very worried about Xiao Zhenrong. He went to the place where they used to play when they were kids and indeed found Xiao Zhenrong sitting alone under a tree, drowning his sorrows in alcohol. Xiao Zhenrong explained what had happened. Lei Yuzheng tried to persuade Xiao Zhenrong to give up on Du Xiaosu, but Xiao Zhenrong just couldn't let her go. After much consideration, he decided to go to Yunnan for voluntary medical work. Lei Yuzheng arranged to meet Du Xiaosu at a golf course. As soon as they met, Lei Yuzheng questioned Du Xiaosu about why she broke up with Xiao Zhenrong. Du Xiaosu simply said that she no longer loved him as the reason. Lei Yuzheng was furious, mocking and belittling Du Xiaosu at every turn. But because Xiao Zhenrong had deep feelings for her, Lei Yuzheng demanded that she reconcile with him. Du Xiaosu refused on the spot. Recalling the story Xiao Zhenrong's mother once told her, Du Xiaosu unknowingly walked to the hospital. Watching Xiao Zhenrong's busy figure and thinking of the happy times they had together, Du Xiaosu was heartbroken and cried uncontrollably. She went to a bar alone to drink, thinking of Xiao Zhenrong, drinking one glass after another. When Lei Yuzheng came out from a business engagement, he saw Du Xiaosu sitting by the roadside, already drunk out of her mind. He pressed her about when she would reconcile with Xiao Zhenrong. Du Xiaosu flatly refused. Lei Yuzheng scolded her for being heartless. Du Xiaosu laughed bitterly and begged him to let her go. Just after finishing work, Xiao Zhenrong received a call from a taxi driver informing him that Du Xiaosu's bag had been left in the car. Watching Du Xiaosu crouch down, Xiao Zhenrong couldn't help but embrace her tightly. He told her that he was leaving for Yunnan. Du Xiaosu didn't say anything. They tearfully bid farewell. Today was the day Xiao Zhenrong was set to leave for Yunnan. Lei Yuzheng personally came to the airport to see him off. He reminded Xiao Zhenrong to take care of himself. Xiao Zhenrong looked around, hoping that Du Xiaosu would come to see him off, but she never appeared. In fact, Du Xiaosu was already on her way. But when she arrived at the airport, Xiao Zhenrong's flight had already taken off. Du Xiaosu received a message from Xiao Zhenrong before his departure, asking her to wait for his return. Looking at Du Xiaosu, Lei Yuzheng coldly warned her not to play with emotions anymore. Du Xiaosu repeatedly emphasized that her feelings for Xiao Zhenrong were real, but Lei Yuzheng didn't believe her at all. Du Xiaosu then received a call from the jewelry store, and only then did she find out that Xiao Zhenrong had already custom-ordered a diamond ring for her. Determined to apologize in person, Du Xiaosu decided to go to Yunnan. When Du Xiaosu arrived at the airport, she learned that heavy rain in Yunnan had caused flight delays. Unable to reach Xiao Zhenrong, she became extremely anxious. Finally, she arrived in Yunnan and immediately called Xiao Zhenrong. To her shock, a doctor answered the phone and informed her that Xiao Zhenrong was in the hospital undergoing emergency treatment. Du Xiaosu was stunned. Meanwhile, Lei Yuzheng saw the news and kept calling Xiao Zhenrong, but no one answered. Seeing Xiao Zhenrong in the middle of a life-saving operation, Du Xiaosu couldn't hold back. Ignoring the nurse's attempts to stop her, she rushed into the emergency room and collapsed beside Xiao Zhenrong's bed, crying uncontrollably. She desperately begged the doctors to save him, reminding them that Xiao Zhenrong had promised to come back. Overcome with grief, Du Xiaosu fainted. When she regained consciousness, she saw Xiao Zhenrong lying there, cold and lifeless. Du Xiaosu screamed at him to wake up, holding him tightly, calling his name loudly. She took out the ring and begged him not to leave. At that moment, Lei Yuzheng arrived and pulled her away, causing her to fall to the ground. Upon learning about the accident, Lei Yuzheng was heartbroken and overwhelmed with grief. He brought Xiao Zhenrong back home, where Xiao's mother wept uncontrollably. Lei Yuzheng cast a fierce glare at Du Xiaosu, who stood far away, too afraid to approach. Du Xiaosu went to the riverside alone, where she felt as if she could see Xiao Zhenrong again, holding her tightly. She felt that he hadn't left, and she would wait for him to come back forever. Lei Yuzheng came alone to the tree where it seemed like he could see Xiao Zhenrong again. Memories of the happy times they spent together flooded his mind. A month later, Lei Yuzheng visited Xiao Zhenrong's grave, where he coincidentally encountered Du Xiaosu, who had also come to visit. Lei Yuzheng grabbed Du Xiaosu and demanded that she leave. He blamed Xiao Zhenrong's death entirely on her, insisting that it was because of her that Xiao Zhenrong went to Yunnan. Although Du Xiaosu felt deeply guilty, her feelings for Xiao Zhenrong were genuine. Lei Yuzheng confronted Du Xiaosu, revealing her true colors. He reminded her of the rainy night a year ago when she had collapsed drunk in front of his car, and it was he who had rescued her. Du Xiaosu was shocked and tried to explain what had happened that night. But Lei Yuzheng didn't want to listen and immediately told her to leave. Du Xiaosu then received a call from a real estate agency urging her to pay the down payment as soon as possible. It turned out that on the day she was supposed to meet Xiao Zhenrong's mother, Xiao Zhenrong had wanted to surprise her with the news that he had already bought a house for them. Unfortunately, she never showed up. Full of regret, Du Xiaosu begged the agent for a few more days, determined to keep the house. She borrowed money from her parents, and even her best friend handed over her savings passbook. However, when she finally gathered enough for the down payment, she was told that Lei Yuzheng had already purchased the house. Du Xiaosu went to find Lei Yuzheng, emptying her bag of all her money and cards onto the table, pleading with him to sell her the house. Lei Yuzheng flatly refused and tore up the purchase contract in front of her. Du Xiaosu swore that she would do whatever it took to buy back the house. She pulled out the contract she had signed with Bu Yuan and realized she had 1 month left. Lei Yuzheng agreed to give her a month to come up with the full payment. If she succeeded, the house would be hers, but if she failed, she would have to leave the city.